My mom remarried about 2 years ago. My dad died when I was 12, so she had been widowed for over 10 years. This new relationship was very whirlwind, with them meeting, dating, and getting married within 3 months. I didn't know much about the guy, but my mom was happy, so I just tried to be supportive. She moved into his house in upstate Virginia and invited my fiance and I to spend a weekend in her new home, getting to know her new husband. My mom's new home was pretty isolated. It sat on a few hundred acres of lovely rolling hills and was very picturesque. I was nervous about getting to know this guy, but really trying to make the most of it. Over the course of our first day there, though, I felt more and more uneasy. I didn't think it was weird, just silly. My mom's new husband was being very welcoming and friendly, and we were made to feel very at home. Yet I still couldn't shake this oppressive feeling. I finally chalked it up to me being more upset about my mom getting remarried than I was willing to admit to myself. We spent most of the day wandering around outside, since I felt worse when indoors. That night, my fiance and I showered together. When I turned my back to him, he stopped talking mid-sentence and asked, "What did you do to your back?" "Well, nothing, why?" I responded. He said that you have a large bruise. I hopped out and tried to see it in the mirror. I got back in and we finished showering in silence, then went off to bed. The one window in our room looked out over a pitch-black empty field, but I couldn't sleep until I hung something over the window. I was sure that otherwise someone would watch us through the window. The next morning, I had a complete meltdown. I woke up and just couldn't stop crying. I told my fiance we had to leave. He tried to calm me down by telling me all of the things I had been telling myself. My feelings of anxiety were just a result of seeing my mom with someone else. The longer I spent with them, the easier it would become. But I just had to leave. It was only Saturday morning and we were supposed to stay until Monday, but I felt completely hysterical. I knew I was on the verge of a panic attack, and my only concrete thought was that I had to stop crying long enough to make our excuse and get the hell out. And that's exactly what we did. As soon as we were on the road, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I was even feeling embarrassed for my behavior, hoping I hadn't insulted my mom's husband leaving early. Then my fiance broke the silence. "That bruise on your back, did you get a good look at it?" I had. It looked like someone had touched the middle of my back with fingers spread wide, with their hand at a tilt. I wanted to make this completely clear. No one had touched my back the previous day, especially hard enough to bruise me. Cut to 3 weeks later, my mom comes to visit me. The entire time, she's hounding me to come stay with her again. After finally trying to change the subject for the 5th time, I level with her. Before I've even finished telling the story, her face is white as a sheet. She tells me she's been feeling the same way in the house and she hates it. She wants them to move as soon as possible. And the real kicker is, her new husband's previous wife shot and killed herself right outside, in the same field our room's window had overlooked. When I was very little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anyone else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept towards the bay windows of our living room and peeked out towards the sound. Sitting on our front porch, was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood, and holding a huge kitchen knife. I freaked out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but I was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I was finally able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that there was nothing there. I kicked and screamed the whole way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing there." To this day, I've never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her the police were coming and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. I never slept in the living room again. I'm not sure how freaky it really is, since it's not paranormal or anything. But when I was about 7 years old, I went for a walk with my babysitter. We were walking back a mile or so from my house on a fairly busy road, and about halfway there, she says we should play Simon Says. At first we walk faster, then skip, and then jog lightly. Then she says, "Simon Says, run as fast as you can. Simon Says, turn here." I was slightly confused, but played along. As we turned down the driveway, I looked back and saw two guys chasing after us, one with a bat and the other with a knife. We ran up to a house and some old people living there let us in, thankfully. At the time, I didn't grasp how fucked up it was that we were getting chased, and I still have no clue why they were doing it. I moved into my dad's when I was 10. I didn't know anyone in the area except for the family my dad was friends with, a single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little bit over the couple years I was there. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work, which is where this story gets terrifying and sad. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom. She knocks a certain way when coming in and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He didn't even think twice about it. But it wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's work schedule. She came inside, and this is where I don't know many details, and I'm kinda glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in a bathtub. Hit her head, and they had to look through the presents to find it. I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. There's an abandoned house next to mine. The previous owner moved out to California 25 years prior and never sold it. One night, I get a flashlight and gloves and pushed the window open and went inside, starting with the basement. In the basement, there was a grand piano. It still played but was very much out of tune. Old World War II stuff and what seemed to be a signed Elvis poster. And some other really cool shit that no one would ever leave behind. There's basically a whole story in that basement, including a broken wedding picture frame and instruments everywhere. On the main floor was an unmade bed. Molded food still in the fridge and on the stovetop. Half-empty beers turned solid and lights that hadn't been turned off. I started walking upstairs when I heard crying from one of the side rooms. That's when I freaked the fuck out. I haven't been back there since. When I was a freshman in college, I was on a film shoot near Route 66. We were shooting on the property of a cafe known for the film Baghdad Cafe. The property has an abandoned motel attached to it, which is where we were shooting this unbelievably bad horror film. The motel's floor was full of papers, something I initially figured was a relic from the past, while the hotel was still actually doing business. A while into the shoot, we started picking up the papers and reading them. They were handwritten letters from the 70s, perhaps never even sent. They were addressed to dozens of different people. They started out normal, but went on to describe some really fucked up things. This was a guy who literally had some demons. He kept talking about how they were watching him and things like that. The handwriting also got more and more messed up as we assembled the letters in chronological order. Meanwhile, outside of the motel, there was a strange storage container with "Keep Out" spray painted on it. Naturally, we were curious. There was a hole in the side and someone reached in and pulled out some documents. Among them was a letter on government typeface, telling the person who wrote those crazy letters that he was unknowingly a participant of some tests of hallucinogenic substances while he was in the army. The whole time, there was a room in the abandoned motel that was sealed off. We were strictly forbidden from entering it. All the windows were covered by plywood and the door was barricaded shut. It smelled like death. It was seriously the worst smell I'd ever encountered in my life. To this day, I don't know what was in that room,